Senator Grassley is on his way and told me to proceed, and I thank him for that. He's always cooperative, and I appreciate that so very much. Today we hear from 5 judicial nominees and 1 nominee to the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. They are Judge Dana Douglas, nominated to the 5th Circuit, Brad Garcia to the D.C. Circuit, Judge Francis Beam, nominated to the Eastern District of Michigan, Jerry Blackwell, nominated to the District of Minnesota, Ann Nardacci, nominated to the Northern District of New York, and Rich DeZinno, nominated to the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. Congratulations to all of you and your families. A number of our colleagues are here to formally introduce nominees, and I'm going to turn to them after introducing 2 circuit nominees. This is going to be a little unusual, but we have members with competing committee responsibilities who need to do their job here and get moving over to another room quickly for another vote. So we're going to accommodate everyone, although it may look disjointed and out of order. There is a plan. My pleasure to introduce Judge Dana Douglas, nominated to the 5th Circuit. Judge Douglas comes from a law enforcement family. Her mother, Miss Ida Woodfork, served in the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office for 30 years. Her uncle, Mr. Warren Woodfork Sr., the first black superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department. Another uncle, Richard Woodfork, agent in both the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. Seeing their work from a young age first sparked her interest in pursuing law and a commitment to public service. Judge Douglas serves as magistrate for the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Louisiana, first appointed to this role in 2019, and over the past 3 years, all 111 reports and recommendations she has authored have been adopted in whole or part by the District Court. Prior to joining the bench, Judge Douglas spent 19 years in private practice at a Louisiana-based firm. She made partner in 7 years. That time, she tried 4 cases to verdict or judgment and handled administrative matters before state agencies. During this period, she also served as commissioner on the New Orleans Civil Service Commission, a quasi-judicial body that regulates the cities of New Orleans civil service. 9 years as the commission's vice president, developed regulations and heard appeals. Earned a BA from Miami University, her JD from Loyola University School of Law, began her legal career by clerking for Judge Ivan Lamel on the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Louisiana. Both Senators Cassidy and Kennedy have returned blue slips on Judge Douglas. Senator Cassidy could not be here today to introduce the nominee, but Senator Kennedy will make remarks in just a moment. If you don't, does that inconvenience your schedule at all? Oh, that's a perfect answer. Thank you, sir. Within reason. Thank you. We also will hear today from Brad Garcia, nominated to the D.C. Circuit, a Maryland native. Mr. Garcia attended Johns Hopkins and Harvard Law. He clerked on the D.C. Circuit Court for Judge Thomas Griffith, a George W. Bush appointee, who has written in strong support of this nomination. Mr. Garcia clerked for Justice Elena Kagan on the Supreme Court, then joined the law firm of O'Melveny Myers. At that firm, had varied litigation practice, focused on appellate work, but did trial work as well. On the appellate front, he dedicated hundreds of hours to pro bono work, representing some of the nation's largest companies on appeals and issues ranging from insurance to patent infringement. Notably, the 4th Circuit appointed Mr. Garcia in 3 cases to serve as amicus counsel or counsel for indigent criminal defendants, which is a testament to his acumen and his impartiality. In total, during his time at O'Melveny, Mr. Garcia represented clients in more than 50 cases before state and federal appellate courts. He argued 13 appeals, including 1 to the Supreme Court, 10 in the Federal Circuit Court, and 10 marriage stage briefs and other 8 certiorari stage briefs in the Supreme Court. Serves as Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Office of Legal Counsel at the Justice Department. If confirmed, he'll be the first Latino judge on the D.C. Circuit. I look forward to hearing from him in a few minutes. I'm going to turn to Senator Grassley when he arrives. But in the meantime, I'm going to recognize the members who are here, particularly those who are in scheduling duress. And I'll start with Senator Stabenow.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. It's wonderful to be here with my partner in the Senate, Senator Peters, and we're here to introduce Judge Kay Beam, whom President Biden nominated to serve on the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan, and we think it's easy to say are here enthusiastically supporting her. Judge Beam is here today with her husband, Michael, and their children, Jack, Ellie, and Annie, and we're so pleased that they could all be with us today. Judge Beam represents the best of Michigan. She and her 4 siblings grew up on a dairy farm in Elma, Michigan, milking cows and baling hay and driving tractors and doing all the other tasks that life on a farm demands, which I appreciate as chair of the Agriculture Committee. During the 1980s farm crisis, her parents nearly lost the farm. That experience changed Judge Beam forever. It led her to pursue degrees in business and law so that she could help other Michigan families. She graduated from Albion College and the University of Michigan Law School. She worked in private practice for 15 years, and in 2009, she was appointed as a trial judge in Genesee County by Governor Jennifer Granholm. During her time as a judge, she has never forgotten her humble roots, and she has worked hard to ensure that everyone who appears before her is seen and heard. She's also active in the community, serving on the board of directors of the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan and Big Brothers Big Sisters of Greater Flint. Judge Beam has done an excellent job serving the people of Michigan, but don't just take my word for it. Here are just a few of the comments we received when our bipartisan committee was considering Judge Beam as a nominee. Judge Beam is, quote, always prepared. She listens. She's fair. She's highly intelligent. She's judicious. Most importantly, she is respected. Judge Beam is, quote, one of the most intelligent and deeply compassionate judges I have ever had the pleasure of working with. And, quote, absolutely no one works harder than Judge Beam. I know Judge Beam credits her parents for that. I have no doubt that she will continue to serve the people of Michigan well on the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan. And, Mr. Chairman, I would urge the committee to support her, and I look forward to enthusiastically supporting her confirmation if this committee recommends her to the full Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Senator Stabenow, and now Senator Peters.
Well, thank you, Chairman Durbin, for holding this hearing. And it is my pleasure to join Senator Stabenow in introducing a truly exemplary Michigander, the nominee for federal bench, Judge Kay Beam, to serve on the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan. Like Senator Stabenow, I want to take a moment to acknowledge her family, her husband Michael, and 3 children, Jack, Ellie, and Annie. It's wonderful to see them here supporting Judge Beam. For the last 13 years, Judge Beam has served as a trial judge on Michigan's 7th Judicial Circuit Court in Genesee County, Michigan. In that role, Judge Beam has presided over both civil and criminal matters, conducting over 1,000 trials. Before Judge Beam's appointment to the 7th Judicial Circuit Court, she spent 15 years as an attorney in private practice. On the bench, praise for Judge Beam's work is widespread. Her colleagues and those who have appeared before Judge Beam describe her as one of the top jurists that they have ever interacted with, and as someone who has the experience, the temperament, and passion to be a distinguished member of the federal bench. They say she gives each person before her an opportunity to be heard and routinely praise her work ethic and her preparation. In particular, I would like to draw attention to Judge Beam's tremendous work on behalf of children, families, and adoptees. For nearly 10 years during Judge Beam's service on the circuit court, she served within the family division, where she presided over cases involving domestic relations and child and juvenile proceedings. These cases not only present significant challenges in terms of economics and mental health and child welfare, but also often involve some of the thorniest legal questions judges must resolve. Despite these challenges and one of the busiest dockets in Genesee County, Judge Beam managed this enormous caseload with both skill and effectiveness. Judge Beam's work ethic and Efficiency on the bench allowed numerous adoption proceedings to be quickly resolved, placing children in loving families without undue delay. Judge Beam's fairness and impartiality on behalf of children and families and all those who have appeared before her in Genesee County have earned her significant respect. I have every confidence in Judge Beam's abilities and look forward to seeing her serve on the federal bench. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Peters, and to you and Senator Stabenow. We know you have a busy schedule. Thank you so much for being with us today. Senator Grassley?
I'm going to put my opening statement in the record. I do have a nominee to introduce.
Without objection. You wanted to introduce someone?
Mr. DeZeno.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay.
Turn your mic on.
I welcome Mr. DeZeno back to the Judiciary Committee. Many members of this committee know Rich because of his excellent work as my chief counsel for national security and crime. Just a few years ago, he's now been nominated to serve on the Privacy Civil Liberties Oversight Board, which is tasked with reviewing laws and executive branch policies related to terrorism. Mr. DeZeno's extensive experience with national security issues and his impressive career have prepared him well for this role. After graduating from the College of the Holy Cross and law school at George Washington University, Mr. DeZeno worked for several years in private practice at a large firm. He then worked as federal prosecutor for 8 years. He prosecuted homicide, fraud, public corruption, national security cases, including terrorist financing cases. He's also worked on counterintelligence investigations. In 2017, Rich joined the Justice Department left the Justice Department to come to work for the United States Senate. He was my chief counsel for national security and crime until 2017, when he continued in that role for then Chairman Graham. On October 2020, he returned to the Justice Department to serve as Associate Deputy Counsel, where he advised the Deputy Attorney General on national security matters. Mr. DeZeno now serves as Vice President for National Insurance Crime Bureau, advising on strategic planning, government affairs, and a wide range of other matters. Rich's work on the Judiciary Committee shows why he's an excellent nominee to serve on the Privacy Civil Liberties Oversight Board. While I was chairman, he played a key role in the reauthorization of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act in 2018. In doing so, Rich showed that he understands that the first responsibility of government is to protect our citizens. He knows that the government needs the tools to keep us safe. He also recognizes that government must respect civil liberties and privacy protections required by our Constitution while using those very same tools that I just talked about. He also is able to keep in mind the changing technology and landscape confronting law enforcement. I believe that Rich will properly balance the interests that we have in privacy and civil liberties with national security needs. Rich, I congratulate you.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Gillibrand, welcome to the committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Grassley, members of the committee. I'm really honored to be able to introduce friend and colleague Ann M. Nardacci, nominee for the United States District Court of the Northern District of New York. I hope she will receive swift confirmation. I know that Ms. Nardacci has excellent qualifications. Her thoughtfulness and dedication to the law will make her a great addition to the federal bench. She spent nearly 20 years taking on big corporations and fighting for transparency and the rights of everyday consumers. With a bachelor's degree from Georgetown University and a law degree from Cornell, Ms. Nardacci currently serves as a partner at the law firm of Boies, Schiller, and Flexner, where she's worked since 2005. She's represented consumers in cases against banks for allegedly providing misleading or inaccurate credit reporting. She has handled cases against large corporations and foreign conglomerates for price fixing and other anti-competitive behavior. And she's even worked to help prisoners who were representing themselves at trial and hearings. She has also served as outside counsel to states' attorneys general prosecuting antitrust enforcement actions. Her commitment to service and leadership in her field goes beyond her work for Boies Schiller. She is a member of the Executive Committee of the New York State Bar Association's Antitrust Section and is also a former member of the Governor's Judicial Steering Committee for the New York State 3rd Department. Ms. Nardachi's commitment to public service was clear even before she was a lawyer. After graduating from Georgetown, she served as a staff member for Congressman Michael McNulty. She began her legal career in 2002 when she joined the law firm of Skadden Arps, where she worked until 2005. In each of her numerous roles, Ms. Nardachi has also shown a powerful commitment to fighting for those who are less fortunate and protecting the rights of consumers. If confirmed, I know that she will bring this perspective and understanding of complex issues that is especially crucial in this time of uncertainty and change. Ms. Nardachi's colleague at Boies Schiller said, "Anne is an excellent attorney and even better person. She is smart, thoughtful, and kind and has the even, calm temperament you want in a judge. She is sure to be fair and listen carefully to everyone who comes before the court. I know that her profound integrity, professional excellence, and calm judicial temperament will serve her well as a judge for the Northern District of New York. I am honored to recommend her for the bench." Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate your coming today. And now I'd like to turn to Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure today to introduce to the committee Judge Dana Douglas, who has been nominated by the President to serve on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Judge Douglas is a native New Orleanian. She is. New Orleans is our largest city in Louisiana, and we're very proud of it. Her roots run deep. I note that one of her uncles served as police chief in New Orleans, who I believe was our first African-American police chief in New Orleans. Her mom's here, right? Her mom worked for our police department throughout her career in New Orleans, and Judge Douglas has an uncle who was served as a federal agent at our Drug Enforcement Administration. Judge Douglas went to Miami University undergraduate, went to Loyola Law School, clerked for Judge LaMille, and then she started practicing law with Lisco and Lewis. Lisco and Lewis is one of the premier law firms in Louisiana. It's an old law firm, and by our standards, it's very large. For many years, it was considered to be one of the premier oil and gas law firms in Louisiana, but those days are long gone. It's now considered to be one of the premier law firms in everything in Louisiana. I've never worked with Judge Douglas, but in an earlier life, I was Louisiana's tax collector, and I used to work with several attorneys at Lisco and Lewis whose specialty was state and local taxation. So it's a great law firm. Judge Douglas worked there, I think, 13 years. She was a partner. She gave up all that big money to become a United States magistrate judge. I'm proud to introduce her to committee. This is not an especially unusual circumstance because except for doing a little teaching, I haven't practiced law since 1995, at least not actively. But Judge Douglas and I don't know each other well. I haven't had the pleasure. We had a good visit in my office, and I'm looking forward to her testimony today. So thanks to you and to all your family for being here.
Thanks, Senator Kennedy. We have several other senators who are on their way. The senators from Minnesota have said they'll wait until the second panel is introduced. But Senator Schumer, because of his schedule as leader, we're going to interrupt our proceedings, as they used to say, when he arrives, which may be in a few minutes. But in the meantime, we're going to get ready and start with the first panel. There's a transition here involving name plates and water, which this young lady will help us with. And we'll call that first panel up as soon as they're ready. So I'd like to ask Judge Douglas and Mr. Garcia to come forward, and I'll administer the committee oath. If you please raise your right hand. You affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Let the record reflect that both nominees answered the affirmative. You may be seated. And again, I forewarn you that when Schumer arrives, there'll be a Schumer moment, and then we'll be back into the first panel. Judge Douglas, please start.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, for that warm introduction. I want to also express my thanks to you, Ranking Member Grassley, and the members of this committee for convening this hearing today. I also want to thank President Biden. I am deeply honored by his nomination of me to serve on the United States Court of Appeal for the Fifth Circuit. If confirmed, I will work hard every day to earn the confidence embodied in this nomination. I also want to thank my home senators, Senator Bill Cassidy and Senator John Kennedy, for their support of my nomination. I sit before you today on the shoulders of the family members who are seated behind me, who I am grateful to for joining me today. First and foremost, my mother. I know flying here today was not an easy task, but as always, you showed up anyway. My beautiful, precocious daughter, who has been hanging out with her Mima all week at museums, has taught me so much more about life seeing it through her eyes. I also have to thank my father, whose health has prevented him from being physically present, but who, along with my mother, has taught me that hard work, diligence, and faith can be life-changing. Also with me today are two of my cousins, Keyshawn Woodfork Waller, who has played nurse to my mother this week in her off time, as she does in her real job, on their journey here to D.C., and my cousin, Captain Michelle Woodfork. And Chairman Durbin, thank you for speaking kindly about my late uncle, Warren Woodfork, Senator Kennedy, you as well, who I was fortunate to have physically present for my investiture in January of 2019, and who I am sure will be there in spirit should I be fortunate enough to be confirmed to this esteemed court. His decision to tag along with a friend to take a police examination some 60 years ago changed the generation as he went from a patrol cop to the superintendent of that department and created a domino effect, a legacy, if you will, of public servants in our family. I am grateful for that, and I am grateful for your acknowledgments. I would be remiss if I did not thank Senior Judge Ivan L. R. Lamel, who taught me during the time that I clerked for him to listen intently to both sides of the facts of the cases brought before us, paying attention to the minutest of details, to thoroughly research the applicable law, and to apply the law accordingly. I have worked to apply those principles every day during my time on the bench, and I will continue to do so. I also want to thank my entire staff, particularly Kelly Brasset Desmond, who is the glue that makes it all come together. I also have to thank my court family, whose en banc support of me during this process, and since my tenure in the Eastern District of Louisiana, has been enthusiastic and consistent. The Eastern District is comprised of some of the hardest working judges in any district, and I have learned so much from each of them, each and every one of them, individually and collectively. I look forward to the members' questions.
Thank you very much, Judge Douglas. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and members of the Judiciary Committee for holding this hearing. And thank you to Chair Durbin for the kind introduction. I am humbled and grateful to be sitting before you today. I want to thank President Biden for the honor of this nomination. If I am confirmed, I will work every day to earn the trust and confidence that would be placed in me. I've had the great privilege of working with and learning from many incredible attorneys over the course of my career, but I'd like to briefly acknowledge two in particular. My first professional experience as a lawyer was to clerk for Judge Thomas Griffith on the D.C. Circuit, and I then had the honor of clerking for Justice Elena Kagan on the Supreme Court. I am incredibly thankful not only for their guidance and friendship over the years, but for showing me the type of judge any nominee should aspire to be. I'd also like to briefly introduce those who are joining me here today. And I have to start with my parents, Nelson and Ruth Garcia, who showed me from a young age the value of hard work, respect, and integrity. I'd also like to thank my father and mother-in-law Frank and Maria Lydia Bloom, who are also here today, for their love and support. And thank you as well to the many others who couldn't be here today, including my brother Nick Garcia, his wife Katrina, and my other family, friends, and colleagues from the Justice Department, O'Melveny and Myers, and elsewhere. Next would be my 3 children, ages 7, 5, and just about 3. My 2 eldest are joining me here today. They are the joys of my life and inspire and challenge me to be a better person every day. And finally, I want to thank my best friend, my wife, Alexis Garcia, who has been my partner and has both kept me grounded and been my biggest supporter since we met in high school. Thank you, and I very much look forward to your questions.
And I want to tell you in advance that I talked to Lucas, your son, and he thinks you're ready.
Yeah.
I asked him if you were prepared, and he has great confidence in you today, so thank you for that. And again, if we interrupt your questioning, it's not a disrespectful decision. It's trying to keep the Senate moving forward, which is important to us. So let me ask you both. You have been in private practice. You have represented clients, some of them controversial, and many people are going to draw conclusions about who you are and what you believe in based on your clients. Tell me, if you will, your own thoughts on advocacy for a client versus the responsibility of a judge. Start with Judge Douglas. You want to turn on the microphone, please?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, for that question. I was fortunate to practice in the city of New Orleans, in the state of Louisiana, in the region, representing a number of individual clients, as well as Fortune 100 company clients, as well as nonprofits. I was able to represent them in a number of different areas, including intellectual property, commercial litigation, some energy litigation as well, and a variety of sectors in the state and federal courts across the state of Louisiana. Since the time that I joined the bench, close to 4 years ago, it has been my goal, I have strived to ensure that I pay particular attention and preside over cases in a way that is reflective of the judicial canons, particularly Judicial Canon 3, which requires us as judges to approach cases with an open mind and be diligent and impartial and fair in all cases. And I believe that my record will demonstrate that.
Thank you. Before Mr. Garcia responds, I'm going to turn to the Majority Leader, Senator Schumer. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, and members of the committee. Thank you for, I know it's a busy day today. We got a lot going on, and I apologize for being a little late, but it's always a pleasure to come before you, and you've always been generous in letting me speak. Now, this morning, I have the honor of introducing Albany's own Ann Nardacci, who I was proud to recommend to President Biden to serve as district judge for the Northern District of New York. First, I want to take a moment to recognize some special guests that Ms. Nardacci has brought with her. In the audience is her family, her son Tom, and her 2 kids, Marie and Tommy. Stand up so they can see you. Very nice. What a wonderful family. You can just see by looking at them. And what a great moment for all of them. Now, Ann Nardacci is one of New York's outstanding legal talents. And as a Capital Region native, she spent nearly 20 years of her career fighting for transparency, the right for consumers, and taking on big corporations for wrongdoing. And she has done this all with her career because she knows where she came from. Her mother was a school teacher, her father a union iron worker. They came from humble origins, and as the first attorney in her family, Ms. Nardacci is making her family proud today. She's a graduate of Georgetown University and Cornell Law School, and she served as an editor of the Cornell Law Review. She began her legal career in New York City, where in private practice she advocated on behalf of consumers and represented those harmed by unfair competition practices. As a current partner in Boies Schiller Flexner LLP in Albany and New York, and an active member of the New York State Bar Association's Antitrust Section's Executive Committee, she spent much of her career representing individuals and entities harmed by price-fixing cartels and other anti-competitive practices by large companies and foreign conglomerates. As a litigator in federal court, She's represented many classes of consumers, including consumer debtors harmed by inaccurate and misleading credit reporting by banks. Ms. Nardacci is an exceptional attorney and would bring tremendous expertise as a consumer advocate to the federal bench in Albany. If confirmed to the Northern District, her perspective would be invaluable in ensuring the federal judiciary fulfills its obligation to ensure equal justice for all. I've been proud to work with many of you to advance nominees who are not only immensely qualified, but who shatter the mold of judicial nominees we've been accustomed to for so long. I'm proud of the historic progress this Senate Democratic majority and the members of your committee under your leadership, Chairman Durbin, have made in confirming well-qualified, diverse nominees to the executive branch, to independent boards, and to the federal bench. And as the Senate continues to confirm more qualified judges, I hope the trailblazers of today can be closer to the norms of tomorrow. We want our courts to include more women and more diverse candidates, both demographically and professionally. I believe that Ms. Nardacci's confirmation would go a long way to helping us achieve that goal. She's a highly accomplished attorney who would bring dignity and honor to her post on the U.S. District Court for the Northern District. So I'm very, very proud to support her nomination, and I thank the committee for letting me speak in her favor.
Thank you very much, Senator Schumer, and we know that you have to be often keeping the Senate moving forward, so thank you very much. Mr. Garcia, you probably recall my earlier question about advocacy, and if you could weave into your answer a fact that should be noted, and that is that you are 36 years old. And although you're not the youngest to ever aspire to a circuit court position, you are one of them. And could you address your personal experience as well as the question of advocacy?
Absolutely, Chair Durbin, and thank you for the opportunity to answer that question. First, the role of advocate and judge are obviously both essential to our system of justice, but they are very different. The job of an advocate is to generate the best possible arguments in favor of your client's position, and judges, by contrast, take an oath to fairly and impartially apply the law in every case. And I think I would be aided in making that transition by my experiences clerking for Judge Griffith and Justice Kagan. They were appointed by presidents of different political parties, but share a dedication to the rule of law and a diligence and collegiality that I've tried to emulate throughout my career. And to address the second part of your question, Senator, I absolutely appreciate that this would be an incredible responsibility. I think I would point to the fact that over the course of my career, the majority was spent in private practice at O'Melveny & Myers, where I was a partner and litigated more than 50 appeals. I argued 13 appeals in the Supreme Court and appellate courts across the country. In that time, I represented Fortune 500 companies and a range of pro bono clients. I've sued the government in religious liberty and administrative law and other cases, and now I work for the government in the Justice Department. So again, I very much appreciate the profound responsibility that this would be, but I do hope and believe that my career has been focused on the type of work that would prepare someone to be an effective appellate judge.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Senator Grassley.
I'm going to start out with Judge Douglas. I'm interested in how you read the Constitution and statutes. The Fifth Circuit regularly fields constitutional questions. Do you believe in the principle of living Constitution?
Thank you, Ranking Member Grassley, for that question. I do not believe in the Constitution being a living document. I have approached each case that I have presided over by first reviewing the text of the statute or the provision that is before me, by making sure I listen intently to the arguments of counsel.
I think you've given me a good answer. Let me go on to the second one. Do you believe that the meaning of a statute can change over time? Now we're talking about a statute that only Congress can change.
Thank you. Again, my practice since the time that I have presided as a United States Magistrate Judge is to focus squarely on the text that is before me, and if that text is clear, I apply the law as written to the facts of the cases before me. I look to the precedent of the Fifth Circuit and the United States Supreme Court in order to assist me in applying those principles to the facts of the case that are before me.
Okay. I'll start. I may come back to you, but I want to go to Mr. Garcia. There was a leak in the Dobbs case. Protesters have taken to picket and parading outside the justice's home. It seems like an obvious attempt to influence the court's decision. The Justice Department has refused to enforce this federal law. You serve as Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel. Often the Attorney General asks this office to weigh in on important questions. Has the Justice Department concluded that this statute is unconstitutional as applied, or is the Justice Department refusing to enforce the law for some other reason?
Thank you, Senator, and I appreciate the question. I can say that I have not been involved in any analysis of that type. One thing that I would say is that having clerked at the Supreme Court and seeing how the justices do their job, I have every confidence that the justices and their staffs are carrying out their constitutional duties without fear or favor to outside pressure.
As a lead-in to my next question, you litigated against Catholic schools in a case before the Supreme Court, arguing that federal courts have the power to intervene in employment decisions involving teachers at religious schools. Your brief acknowledged that teachers at religious schools serve important religious functions, but still claimed that the so-called ministerial exception shouldn't apply to them. Now, a majority of the Supreme Court, including Kagan and Breyer, disagreed with you. Why, in your view, should the protections of the First Amendment not apply to employment decisions at religious schools?
Thank you, Senator. I have great respect for the First Amendment values that are the basis of the ministerial exception. And in fact, in other cases, I've represented plaintiffs bringing religious exercise claims that rely on similar principles. As to those specific cases, my firm was retained by the plaintiffs, and in that capacity, our firm advocated zealously for that position. That was actually only the second Supreme Court case ever to consider the scope of that exception, so there was significant uncertainty. And now, of course, as you noted, the Supreme Court issued a decision, and if I were confirmed, I would have no hesitation about applying the court's holding and the guidance it set forth.
My last question will be to you, Mr. Garcia. You fought against the construction of border wall in El Paso versus Trump. Your argument, among other things, was that the president couldn't use funds earmarked for counter-drug activities to build the wall, given that securing our southern border would reduce the influx of lethal drugs like fentanyl. Why is it inappropriate for the executive branch to use funds earmarked for counter-drug activities to secure the border?
Thank you, Senator. I actually became involved in that case only at the Supreme Court level when the clients were considering seeking Supreme Court review because of my past experience with similar petitions. As to the specifics of that case, it was an intricate statutory interpretation issue about whether certain appropriations could be used to certain ends. And beyond that, that was the scope of my involvement in that case.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Feinstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I look at this, we have before us two very well qualified nominees. Judge Douglas, you have experience in the process of judging through your service as a federal magistrate judge for the Eastern District of Louisiana. And Mr. Garcia, you have delivered 13 oral arguments in appeals cases in both state and federal courts. And you have prepared written legal briefs in dozens of other appeals, including 18 briefs in cases before the United States Supreme Court. So I consider you both eminently qualified. So let's talk for a moment about the experiences that both of you have had that put you in this particular position. I think, you know, newcomers and people looking for appointments might be interested in hearing from two very well-qualified people. So being a feminist, let me begin with the female here.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I have enjoyed a varied career, so to speak. I started off clerking in the Eastern District of Louisiana, where I now serve as a magistrate judge, to now Senior Judge Ivan L.R. Lamel. During that clerkship, I learned a lot from Judge Lamel about being a good lawyer, being a good person, and being a good judge. Judge Lamel also had the opportunity to serve as both a United States magistrate judge as well as now on the Eastern District of Louisiana. After that, I accepted a job as an associate at a law firm in the city of New Orleans, Lisco & Lewis, where I had the opportunity to practice primarily in the area of commercial litigation. I also had the opportunity to participate and serve on trial teams that also had work in intellectual property, both on the application of certain, for trademarks and copyrights and things of that nature, as well as on the litigation side. Lisco & Lewis afforded me the opportunity not only to be a good lawyer, but to be a good leader in the community. And I had the opportunity to serve in several bar associations and network with various lawyers in the community and judges in the community as well.
Thank you. Please.
Yes, thank you, Senator. I think one of the lessons I learned early in my career, especially watching my two judges in action, is the importance of collegiality and engaging respectfully with everybody you come across, every person, every issue, and having an open mind. And I think those are traits that I've tried to have.
You really can do that with everyone?
I think it's important to do your best, especially with folks who might disagree with you. It's the best way to learn and to sharpen your own thinking. And that's something that I try to take into every experience, and I hope it served me well.
Thank you. I may learn from you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kennedy, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Garcia, how old are you?
Senator, I'm 36.
Okay. And you're now at the Department of Justice. You were at O'Melveny and Myers.
That's correct.
You were a partner there?
Yes, sir.
How many partners are there at O'Melveny? Now, it's a great law firm.
My guess would be between around 150.
Yeah. Okay. Given your age and your experience, are there any partners at O'Melveny and Myers that have more experience that you think would make a better addition to our courts of appeal? Are you the very best that O'Melveny has to offer?
Senator, O'Melveny and Myers has many incredible attorneys.
Agreed.
And I would certainly hope to just be judged on my own record.
I'm just comparing. Well, let's move on. I want to understand your record. You've done a lot of pro bono cases. The June Medical Services case, was that a pro bono case?
Yes, Senator, I believe so.
Okay, so that means you weren't paid. The firm wasn't paid.
That's correct.
You just chose to do it.
The firm was not paid. As an attorney, I would have been compensated for my time.
Yeah, but the firm wasn't paid.
That's correct, Senator.
So you didn't have to do it to eat?
No.
Okay. And in June Medical Services, that was a Louisiana case, you argued that a doctor should not have to have admitting privileges at a hospital in order to perform an abortion. You said that was unconstitutional. Is that my understanding correct?
Senator, that case was unique because just 4 years earlier, the Supreme Court
Yeah,
had
but is
held
my
a very
understanding of
similar.
that case right, Counselor?
Yes, that's correct. Our clients argued that
All right,
law
let me
was
ask you this.
unconstitutional.
The New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus City of New York. You represented the City of New York. Was that a pro bono case?
Yes, Senator, it was.
Okay, so you didn't have to do it to eat. You chose to do it.
At a large law firm, Senator, if you're asked to work on a case, in my experience, unless I was too busy, I believe I always said yes.
Yes, but you were a star at O'Melveny. I mean, you were a Supreme Court clerk. You can pick and choose your cases. All right, and in that case, you argued that a gun owner in New York City could own a gun in his home, but he couldn't take it, or she couldn't take it outside their home, including to a shooting range. Is that right?
Senator, it's actually a little bit different. Individuals could take their firearms to training ranges in the city, but that case actually focused on a doctrine of mootness.
Yeah, but you supported the New York's position to restrict the ownership of guns. Is that correct?
Senator, that case, certainly New York City was our client. There
Okay.
was a regulation on premises licenses and where
Right.
folks could train with them.
Right. I think most people know what the case is, Counselor. Now, the Our Lady of Guadalupe School v. Morrissey was another case you handled against Catholic elementary schools. Was that a pro bono case?
Yes, Senator, I believe so.
So you didn't have to, that you weren't paid. You didn't have to do it to eat. You chose to do it.
Similar to before, I enjoyed litigating complex cases, especially in the Supreme Court, so I would have agreed
Right.
when I was asked.
And so you were arguing against strike that. You were arguing against the Catholic elementary schools and against, at least from their point of view, their religious freedom. Is that correct?
I think that's fair, Senator. Our firm represented the plaintiffs in those cases.
All right. I got 45 seconds left, Counselor, and I wanted to ask Judge Douglas a question, but I don't know if I'm going to have time. She says it's okay. We've had a circumstance in America where we have prosecutors who have chosen not to prosecute an entire line of cases, not to exercise prosecutorial discretion, but just to say, even though the legislature passed a statute saying, let's say, shoplifting of any amount but under $950 is a crime, certain prosecutors have said, I just don't believe that's right. I'm not going to prosecute those cases. And they have taken it on themselves. What is your opinion of that?
Thank you, Senator. I think those types of decisions are very important for prosecutors to make carefully. And as you suggested...
What's your opinion? Are they right or wrong?
Well, Senator, as a judicial nominee, what I could commit is that if a case involving questions like that...
What's your opinion? Are they right or wrong?
Well, Senator, in the abstract, I think every executive branch, the president, has a constitutional duty to take care of the...
Do you have an opinion, Counselor?
Senator, as a
Have you
judicial
thought about
nominee... It is absolutely an important issue. In fact, the Supreme Court...
Have you thought about it?
The Supreme Court just
I'm running
granted...
out of time. Have you thought about it?
I have actually not worked on a case
So you have no
relating to
opinion
that.
about what's going on all across America in terms of prosecutors not prosecuting criminals. You're telling me that. A Supreme Court clerk for Justice Kagan,
Senator,
Margaret O'Melveny and Myers. You're telling me you haven't thought about that?
Oh, that's not what I'm saying at all, Senator.
Okay.
What I'm saying
Tell
is...
me your opinion.
I hope you'll appreciate that the Code of Judicial
You're not going to
Conduct...
give me your opinion, are you?
Senator, my opinion is that
I'm
those
done.
are important
Thank
questions.
you, Mr. Chairman.
So several senators have come and gone on the Republican side. I believe the first senator who is here in line is Senator Blackburn and then Senator Lee, if others do not appear. So Senator Blackburn, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to each of you. Congratulations on your appointments. Judge Douglas, let me come to you. I see that you have been a magistrate judge in Louisiana since 2019.
Correct.
And appreciate your service to that. And today you are trying to move up, and you would be just one step from the Supreme Court there at an appellate court. The Supreme Court has made a lot of news lately, particularly in the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization case. In fact, Dobbs came to the Supreme Court from the Fifth Circuit, and I'm certain that you are aware of that. And the Dobbs case held, the Supreme Court does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey are overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion is returned to the people and their elected representatives. Have you read the Dobbs decision?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I have.
And do you agree with the Dobbs finding they're holding?
Thank you, Senator. I have read through the Dobbs decision. I understand it to be the current precedent for the United States Supreme Court. As a sitting judge and also as a judicial nominee, I don't think it is appropriate for me to speak in terms of what I believe. It has always been my position to follow any precedent that is set forth by the Fifth Circuit or by the United States Supreme Court, and I intend to do that if I am so fortunate as to be elevated to the United States Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
All right. So you would abide by Dobbs?
I would abide by Dobbs and any Supreme Court precedent that is set.
Okay. So if you are confirmed to the court and you're presented with cases where the right to obtain an abortion is an issue, then what you're saying is that you would follow the Dobbs opinion and you would apply that in the cases before you.
I am saying that thank you, Senator, I would take a look at the record before me. I would listen to the arguments of counsel, and I would apply the law as set forth by the Supreme Court.
That one was a yes or no. I know that you have, in your speeches and writings, have mentioned a good bit about your family's public service and the fact that you have law enforcement in your family, and you've celebrated that. And separately, I understand that you have worked with and professionally interacted with attorneys, including one who is now a high-ranking DOJ official, that have voiced support for police reform measures like greater reliance on community policing, enhanced use of federal consent decrees over police departments, elimination of cash bail. So, do you share in the promotion of these progressive police reform policies, or do you support the men and women in uniform?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I am not aware of the comments or the policies that you just spoke of. I will say that I am very proud of my family's service.
Well, let's do this. I'm going to submit some of that to you in the QFRs, and then you can respond to me in the QFRs if you're supportive of your family, the law enforcement officers in uniform, or if you support some of the progressive reforms. I'd like to know that. Mr. Garcia, you had a tough time answering my colleague from Louisiana over here. So let me just ask you this. New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. Have you read that?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, and do you agree?
Senator, I would fully follow the Supreme Court's holding in Bruen.
So you support the Second Amendment and the individual right to bear arms?
Yeah, Senator, that has been reaffirmed in Heller, McDonald, and now Bruen. And
okay, all right. And looking at there's been a lot of discussion about age with nominees that come before us. We had one judge that went to the circuit, and he was 38 years old, more experience. He had actually been a judge. But you are 36, and you have never been a judge of any type, county, city, state, federal. Am I correct on that?
That's correct, Senator. Instead, I've spent my career in private practice and now in the Justice Department.
All right. Has any Democrat member of this committee or any other Democrat member of the U.S. Senate ever suggested to you that you are too young and too inexperienced to take a position on the circuit?
Senator, nobody has made that suggestion directly to me. I certainly appreciate that I'm among the younger nominees and that it's within the committee's judgment as to whether I'm prepared.
Do you feel you have the experience, never having been a judge?
Senator, I do. Having litigated more than 50 appeals and argued 13 of them, and especially having clerked for
Argued
Judge Griffith.
Before the circuit.
Oh.
You've argued before the court.
I've argued in the Supreme Court and many appellate courts around the country. Yes,
All
Senator.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got back just in time. Congratulations to both of our nominees. I asked the following two initial questions of every nominee who comes before any of the committees on which I sit. So I will ask you, both of you, these questions. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
Thank you, Senator. I have not.
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
No.
Mr. Garcia, I know that you've done a lot of pro bono work, but maybe half of your professional work has involved corporate clients. Can you tell us about some of the more interesting cases that you've had in support of your corporate clients?
Certainly, and thank you, Senator. I think it's probably closer to 3/4 of my work was for paying clients at the law firm, and that work was very wide-ranging. I would say I have litigated administrative law cases in the D.C. Circuit. I've litigated cases about class actions in the Supreme Court, and really a range of cases. As an appellate litigator, in fact, I was essentially a generalist and would learn to get up to speed in new areas frequently and absorb detailed records.
Class action cases are very complicated. You noted that you had a class action case before the U.S. Supreme Court. Can you just briefly tell us what the issue was or who was involved in that class action case?
Senator, that involved an issue of tolling of statutes of limitations, and it was a sort of unresolved question in the courts about when certain suits could be filed.
That's pretty important. I remember things like statute of limitations, et cetera. So in terms of all of the pro bono work that you've done, are there particular areas of the law that were really important to you to get your point across, or that of your pro bono clients?
Thank you, Senator. It was always an honor to have the opportunity to represent all of my clients, but particularly pro bono clients, because you not only have the opportunity to give voice to their claims, but you're really helping the court also by presenting their claims well. One case that really has stuck out for me is I spent many years litigating on behalf of 4 Muslim federal inmates bringing a religious exercise claim, and our firm was very gratified that we secured them the relief they sought in that case.
I think that there may be some who consider you young, although you've already clerked in the Supreme Court, have you not?
That's correct, Senator.
As well as in the appellate court. In fact, one of your judges was a Bush nominee.
That's correct, Judge Thomas Griffith.
You have a wide range of support from across the political spectrum. And the Bush nominee judge said what about your abilities?
I believe Judge Griffith has said nice things. That's, and I know he submitted a letter in my support. And I think his example, really, and starting with working for him, I think my full record is one of working with clients and attorneys productively regardless of partisan affiliation, and really respectfully engaging and listening carefully to everybody I work with is something I've tried to do throughout my career.
And to be fair. So as an observation, I believe you have more litigation and legal experience than 2 of the current serving members of the D.C. Circuit. For Judge Douglas, I think you've written or spoken about the importance of diversity in our courts. Can you express why that is an important element for you?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I have remarked in the past that it was seeing people in positions who look like me that helped to make my own dreams as a kid feel more tangible. It is my hope that if I am so fortunate as to be elevated to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, that it will serve as some motivation for anyone who was looking upon and looking to learn from the process. I do understand that the best way to be a role model in a position like this is to make sure that we diligently follow the judicial canons and that we look upon every case, coming into every case, to make sure that we are working diligently, impartially, and fairly.
You have an impressive record, and I agree with you that representation is very important, just as having Justice Ketanji Jackson on the Supreme Court is very critical. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Rono. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to both of you for being here. Mr. Garcia, I'd like to start with you. I can vouch for the fact that Judge Griffith speaks very highly of you and has for years. He's a good man, and I'm honored to know him, and I know that you're honored to have worked for him and also to have clerked for Justice Kagan. I've got a few questions. So in the brief that you submitted in the Our Lady of Guadalupe case, Our Lady of Guadalupe versus Morrissey-Berrieux, you represented the respondents, and in that case you argued that the ministerial exception shouldn't apply to teachers at a Catholic school, even if they were teaching religion. And the line that you used in the brief that stuck out to me was, quote, teaching religion cannot automatically dictate ministerial status, close quote. So here's what strikes me as interesting here. I mean, for churches that run schools, they're running schools for a reason. They're running religious schools because they want to teach about their religion. So I'm finding it hard to understand why it is that a religion teacher at a religious school wouldn't be subject to the ministerial exemption. So what am I missing here?
Well, thank you, Senator. Certainly the Supreme Court held that those teachers were subject to the ministerial exception. And just the specific point that you referenced, I believe the point that the brief was making, and again, all of this was in the capacity of an advocate for our clients, but the point the brief was making was that teaching religion alone should not be dispositive because, for example, at a secular school, you might teach religion. Of course, the considerations that you referenced were key ingredients to the Supreme Court's holding.
Right.
And
teaching religion at a secular school, at a public school, has a different impact, does it not, than at a religious school?
Certainly, Senator. And I think, again, in the capacity of an advocate, the other thing that brief emphasized with this, those teachers taught a range of subjects. But again, I want to be clear. That was, as you know, just the second case on the scope of the ministerial exception. I believe we discharged our duties to our clients in that case. And as a judge, I would take an oath to fairly and impartially apply the law.
Okay.
And I would do that.
Right, that's helpful. Yeah, the court did rule 7-2 in that case, including with the vote of your former boss, Justice Kagan. I thought the court's reasoning was good. The court concluded, quote, religious education and formation of students is the very reason for the existence of most private religious schools, and therefore the selection and supervision of the teachers upon whom the schools rely to do this work lie at the core of their mission, close quote. Okay, so you're telling me you would have no problem, no hesitation in applying the ministerial exception consistent with the majority's ruling in Morrissey?
Not at all, Senator, and I would just say, as I've mentioned a couple times already, that I have great respect for the First Amendment values at issue there and have in fact represented plaintiffs in religious exercise cases as well.
Okay. In another brief that you authored and that you submitted to the Supreme Court of the United States in the June Medical case, June Medical versus Russo, you argued that, quote, the 14th Amendment protects the right of a woman to obtain an abortion, close quote. The Supreme Court has more recently, in the Dobbs opinion, held that, quote, the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. So will you follow that precedent, and do you regard that precedent as binding on you as a judge, and do you support that precedent?
Senator, absolutely. I would apply that without reservation, and it really harkens back to my experience with Judge Griffith. I'll always remember the first day we were all together in his chambers, he sat us down around his table and told us that regardless of any differing personal or political beliefs about how a case should come out, our job that year would be to apply the law and only the law. And we did our best to live up to that. I will do the same if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed.
Was the Supreme Court right in Dobbs?
Senator, as with any decision of the Supreme Court, I would follow it fully and faithfully, and both the specific holding and the methodology applying Glucksberg's test for unenumerated rights.
Do you agree with the reasoning?
Senator, as a judicial nominee, and again, going back to my experience with Judge Griffith and Justice Kagan, what I can commit to you is my beliefs about the correctness or not of binding precedent would simply play no role in my job as a judge. I take very seriously the Constitution's role calling for independent and impartial judges. Another thing Judge Griffith emphasized was his oath. You take an oath to fairly and impartially apply the law, and I would do that.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Coons?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin. Ranking Member Grassley, I'd like to congratulate all of the nominees today, to you and to your families, friends, and supporters who are here either in person or watching. I am proud of the record of this committee and what we've done this Congress to ensure that we move forward with the confirmation of the highly qualified nominees who've been advanced by President Biden. And I'm proud of President Biden's attention to nominating qualified, outstanding candidates for the federal bench of both diverse personal and professional backgrounds. So, Mr. Garcia, if I might, we've heard discussion, even some criticism today about positions you may have advocated for in your legal career that some of my colleagues may consider either too progressive or too liberal. As an attorney in private practice, have you had to take positions on occasion on behalf of clients that may or may not have aligned with your personal views or values?
Senator, absolutely. The job of an advocate is to generate the best possible arguments on behalf of your client, and that's what I did in each and every case.
So how did the experience of working on matters you may not have agreed with actually arguably help prepare you for the role of a federal judge?
Thank you, Senator. I do think that it has, because one commonality between the role of an advocate or a judge, although they are very different roles, is that your personal beliefs simply play no part in the work that you should be doing. And I have great respect for the fact that judges take an oath to impartially apply the law, and that is an essential part of our Constitution's scheme of separation of powers and the rule of law.
Well, Mr. Garcia, I've been struck by some of the letters that this committee received. You clerked, as you've described before, for a judge, Judge Griffith, very well regarded as a conservative legal mind, appointed by President George W. Bush to the D.C. Circuit. Judge Griffith wrote to this committee in enthusiastic support of your nomination. And if I might, I'll just briefly read a couple of sections of this. Despite differing views on important matters, he writes, Brad worked well with all the other clerks, modeled for all of us the value of listening carefully and respectfully to the views of others. He went on, Brad knew I'm a judicial conservative. He played his role of helping me be that type of judge regardless of his own personal views. Brad's integrity in this regard, coupled with his brilliance, gave me complete confidence in his work. Many have written about the polarization, the political polarization that besets our nation. The judiciary can be a model for how to approach divisive issues in a civil and respectful manner. Please reflect, if you would, for a moment on your experience clerking for Judge Griffith and whether you think you could also model that approach. I happened to clerk on the Third Circuit for a judge whose political affiliation was different from mine, but who was a tremendous model of reasoning and of balance, and who intentionally chose clerks so that there was a range of training and background and views. And I think in our view, it produced better and more thorough and better reasoned input for our judge to make her decisions.
Thank you, Senator. It was certainly a tremendous experience to clerk for Judge Griffith, and I'm so grateful for his support. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you've said. I think it's fair to say that the 4 clerks in Judge Griffith's chambers that year were all from very different backgrounds and perspectives, and I shared your experience of thinking that maybe the best way to learn and to sharpen your thinking is to engage carefully and listen to those who might disagree with you. And both Judge Griffith and Justice Kagan, for me, are great models of that. And I would very much hope to bring those traits, which I think have helped make me successful throughout my career, to the bench if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed.
Mr. Chairman, I've got several, if they haven't already been submitted for the record, I'd ask unanimous consent, but I just wanted to briefly reference one last letter that was striking to me because clerking for the Supreme Court is a very intense experience. It's an opportunity to get to know other legal minds. You clerked for Justice Kagan, but we received a letter of support for you signed by law clerks from Justices Scalia and Thomas to Ginsburg and Kagan. And the text of that is clear. It says, "We speak," and I quote, "with one voice supporting Mr. Garcia's nomination to the D.C. Circuit. And we do so because we know your intellect, temperament, and experience and know you to be eminently qualified." I just thought, Mr. Chairman, it was important to add some of this to the record. Might I ask one last question of Judge Douglas, or should I respect the imminent end of time?
Proceed as you wish.
Time on this committee, I mean, not time itself. If I might, Judge Douglas, you've spoken about how your interest in public service began with your family's commitment to law enforcement. You have an uncle who was superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department, I think the first black superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department, an uncle, an agent for the DEA. Your mother worked for the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office. Could you just briefly share with us how your life, your career, your approach to judging has been impacted by having close family ties to public service and to the law?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. Certainly, my family has impacted the way I have sort of visualized myself in various career disciplines or what have you. I kind of knew that law enforcement might not be the thing for me, per se. I joke a little bit that I couldn't see myself in high heels with a gun around my belt, so I decided to go a different path. And so here I am. I winded up practicing law instead. I have enjoyed the practice that I've had in law. I was able to represent a number of different clients individually and corporations, nonprofits, in varying degrees of disciplines, be it intellectual property, commercial litigation, as well as some energy litigation. I think that my family's background in law enforcement has certainly helped to inform at least my exposure to criminal law, since I practiced primarily in civil law and as a commercial litigator. I was able to at least speak the language once I came onto the bench and was faced as a United States magistrate judge and doing first appearances and rearrangement and things of that nature.
Well, thank you, Judge Douglas. Mr. Garcia, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your forbearance.
Thank you, Senator Coons. We have three remaining Democratic senators to ask, Senators Whitehouse, Blumenthal, and Padilla, and it depends on the arrival of Republican senators, but we'll start with Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman, and welcome to both of the witnesses who are here. I wish you well in your process through this committee and onto the floor. I often ask nominees their views about the jury, and so that it's not a trick or sneak question, I will refer back to the great Blackstone and his view that the jury was an institution that helped ordinary folks have an even chance against what he called the more powerful and wealthy citizens. It had that role in our system of government. And it's obviously defended from corruption and influence in a whole lot of different ways. The jurors are chosen at random. You get a new set every time, so you can't go to the juries and make friends. And, of course, tampering with jurors is a crime. So my contention, and I think Blackstone's and others, is that a jury is not just a fact-finding appendage of a trial judge, but actually is an important piece of America's architecture of governance and should be treated as such. And I also often note that the Supreme Court seems to have gone on a binge of trying to diminish and deprecate the civil jury, which, if my thesis is correct, that the Supreme Court has largely been captured by big corporate special interests, would be consistent with trying to undermine the civil jury, because you don't really want a institution that pushes back against the more wealthy and powerful members of society, who are today corporate members of society, if you're in tow to those corporate members of society. Without asking you to get into that second conversation,
Could you please explain your views on the importance of the civil jury in the context of American governance? Judge Douglas.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. It is my belief that the jury system is an essential part of the justice system. Certainly, the Seventh Amendment speaks to the right to a jury, and I think it is every litigant's right who comes before the court to have their matters heard, to have the opportunity and the option to have a jury listen to those concerns, and to be the trier of fact for those issues.
Mr. Garcia?
Thank you, Senator. I wholeheartedly agree with Judge Douglas. Great respect for the Seventh Amendment protection of civil jury, I think, and the Sixth Amendment as well as a check on government in criminal cases.
And I would just say to anyone who is concerned about Mr. Garcia's level of experience, I've been on this committee a little while, and I watched Justin Walker come through, who at the time of his nomination was not listed on a single litigation filing, had never served as sole or chief counsel in any case tried to verdict or judgment. Naomi Rao came through with no judicial experience, no experience litigating before federal courts, state courts, or administrative agencies, had never briefed or argued an appeal, had never tried any case in any capacity. She appeared in one single amicus brief in the Eighth Circuit. Amy Coney Barrett came through for the Seventh Circuit with almost no litigation experience and, of course, no judicial experience. And Allison Jones Rushing came through at the age of 36, never having appeared or argued before the United States Supreme Court. So there's a rather one-sided approach here to the concerns that have been expressed about Mr. Garcia. I think that some of these other judges brought other credentials that relate to the court capture effort, and I note specifically that Judge Rao came out of the Koch brothers political operation funded doctrine factories where things like what's now been added to the Supreme Court's roster, the major questions doctrine, got revived, fertilized, invigorated, and put into play so that judges could then move them into the law of the land from the doctrine factories. So I think just a moment's reflection on balance is appropriate as we consider some of this commentary. And I welcome you both, and I wish you well.
Senator Whitehouse, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Graham has arrived, and he is next.
I will yield to Senator Graham. I have to run. I've got a meeting with the sitting commander here. If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Richard DeZeno in our next panel. I won't be here. He is going to be considered to be a member of the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. He worked for myself and Senator Grassley as he was the Deputy Attorney General Office for National Security. This privacy board is trying to balance civil liberties against crime fighting and collection of intelligence. He was a terrific young man. He probably appreciates being called young, and I just cannot tell you how supportive I am of him. He's a JD from George Washington University Law School, a BA from Holy Cross, and everybody on the committee knows him, and he's just absolutely the right guy at the right time, and I want to go ahead and introduce him even though I can't be here. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Senator. I recognize Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Chairman Durbin. Thank you both for your public service and for your willingness to continue to serve. And I look forward to supporting you both. You both have demonstrated admirably not only your legal acumen and talent, but also your dedication to the rule of law. I want to ask you, Mr. Garcia, if I may, because there are questions about your experience which I consider to be somewhat preposterous, to talk a little bit about maybe one or two of the cases that you've argued and how you learn from them. In other words, what strikes me about the litigation that you've done is
you know, you can do years of litigation, you can do numbers of cases, but the magnitude and importance of the litigation, the challenges that you have faced in them, I think, are very, very unusual, if not unique. And whether it's voting rights or gun safety or reproductive rights, you have been really at the cutting edge of a lot of litigation. So maybe the impact of those cases on your litigation and your legal ability.
Certainly. Thank you, Senator. And if you'll indulge me, I'll just first speak to sort of the range of work that I've done. And just as an example, in my last year at the law firm alone, I served as trial counsel at 2 federal jury trials. I argued a pro bono case in the Supreme Court, and I argued 3 appeals in federal appellate courts. 2 were patent cases, 1 a financial services case. I also briefed cases on administrative law, bankruptcy law, and a case about venue manipulation in the federal circuit. And as to sort of 2 cases that stand out for me, that last one that I mentioned was a petition for a writ of mandamus from the federal circuit, which teaches you a lot about some of the less used procedures in the law, and our clients were able to secure a precedent-setting ruling from the federal circuit. And also the Supreme Court case that I argued was very different, but we advocated as zealously as we could. That was a pro bono case that was a criminal appeal. And I think from the range of work that I've done, I've essentially taken away the lessons of trying to get to the heart of a matter quickly and to listen carefully and try to communicate clearly.
Thank you. Judge Douglas, on the Fifth Circuit, you will be serving with a group of judges, some of whom you may know well, others maybe not. Your experience on the bench so far probably has given you some insight as to the importance of collegiality. Could you talk a little bit about what you have absorbed from your experience so far on the federal bench?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I believe that it is always my goal to work collaboratively with everyone who I work with. I have practiced law and been a leader in the bar community and a judge. The one running continuum through all of those positions is that I seek out opinions or thoughts that may not necessarily be aligned with mine, just to, I'm sort of intrigued by hearing what some of the other viewpoints are before making my own decisions. And I think if I am so fortunate as to be confirmed to the Fifth Circuit, the same would be true there as I, continue to do in the role that I play now as a United States Magistrate Judge, and that is to listen to all viewpoints. That's the way I have presided over my cases, to listen to all viewpoints, to review the record that is before me, and to apply the law accordingly.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to each of you. Mr. Garcia, you are 11 years out of law school, and you're 36 years old. If you are confirmed, you would be the youngest judge on the D.C. Circuit in decades. Do you believe you're the best person, most qualified for the job?
Senator, I am honored to be here today to answer your questions. I certainly wouldn't purport to call myself the best of anything, but I'm very happy to be judged based on my record and to answer your questions today.
Well, it's interesting because this committee has some history with this question, and one person that, if he were applying the same standards, would come out squarely against your being qualified would be the chairman of this committee, Chairman Durbin, because in response to the nomination of Judge Justin Walker to serve on the D.C. Circuit in 2020, Chairman Durbin argued that Judge Walker, based on his age and experience, both of which were greater than yours, was not sufficient to the task of being a D.C. Circuit judge. Specifically, despite Walker having served a year as a district court judge, you've never served as a judge, and despite Walker, like you, being a former Supreme Court clerk, Senator Durbin singled out Judge Walker's relatively young age, 38, 2 years older than you are, as an indicator of his lack of preparedness for the D.C. Circuit. Leader Schumer went even further, attacking Judge Walker, calling Judge Walker's nomination a, quote, disgrace. Were Durbin and Schumer wrong?
Senator, I can't speak to anyone else's nomination. What I can speak to is my record. And in my career, I've litigated more than 50 appeals, argued 13 of them. I sit before you here today as a Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Justice Department. And having started my career...
Okay, good. Let's talk about your time at OLC. Did you personally advise, assess, or work on, in any capacity, Biden's Executive Order 14075, which would cut funding for school lunch programs for school districts that did not comply with federal LGBT mandates?
Senator, I do not believe so. Sitting here today, I don't think so.
Okay. Did you advise, assess, or work in any capacity on Executive Order 14076 dealing with efforts to federalize abortion post-Dobbs?
Senator, no, I did not do any work related to that executive order.
Okay. How about the Biden administration's efforts to revoke Title 42 at the border?
Senator, I provided legal advice related to the CDC's most recent order. I believe it was April 1st, and that order is currently in litigation.
So you're talking specifically, though, about Title 42?
The Title 42 order issued by the CDC, yes.
All right. Did you advise, assess, or work on the Biden administration's efforts to revoke the Remain in Mexico agreement?
Senator, no, I've not worked at all on that. And if I may, just to be clear, I'm very happy to answer exactly these types of questions about whether I've worked on matters of public record and even subject matters, but I'll just have to be careful not to disclose any confidential or non-public information.
Okay. How about the Biden administration's recent Title IX regulations that remove due process protections for the accused? Did you work on that?
Senator, I provided legal advice on the Department of Education's notice of proposed rulemaking. I would just note briefly, I believe there's an extensive discussion. It's a very long proposal, 700 pages, but there's a bit of discussion about why the revised procedures, in the department's view, comply with due process.
So, you have an impressive background. You clerked on the Supreme Court, but you're a pretty liberal guy. Would you agree with that?
Senator, I know folks use those terms differently. It's certainly fair to say I've represented, in addition to Fortune 500 companies, some clients affiliated with
Look, I got to say, looking over your clients, it's actually impressive just how much of a left-wing advocate you've been and the scope of it. So on abortion, you've argued against restrictions on abortion. On religious freedom, you've argued against Catholic elementary schools and against religious liberty. On the Second Amendment, you've argued against giving real force to the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. On the border wall, you've fought against construction of the border wall. On immigration, you've advocated on behalf of illegal immigrants. I have to say it is a record that would situate you well if you were a Democratic candidate for Congress or for the Senate, because it is clearly a record of political advocacy consistently on the left. I guess my question to you is, given that clear political, ideological advocacy, a lifetime work that I assume is heartfelt, how can the American people be confident as a judge that you won't simply continue that left-wing advocacy from the bench rather than follow the law?
Thank you, Senator. I think I would say that the majority of my career was spent in private practice at a corporate law firm where, of course, the bulk of my work was representing Fortune 500 companies. And to your broader question, I would just point to my track record over my career of working productively with clients and attorneys regardless of partisan affiliation. I believe that's reflected not only from my first days clerking for Judge Griffith, but from the wide range of support my nomination has garnered. And I hope that those speak to my integrity and my fidelity to the rule of law, because the fact is I would take my oath to fairly and impartially apply the law incredibly seriously. It would be an honor to play a small part in our Constitution system of separation of powers.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I recognize Senator Padilla, I obviously want to correct the record from something that's been previously said about a previous nominee, Justin Walker. First, I think it bears noting that this nominee, Mr. Garcia, has an extensive record. Though only 36 years old, he has been an appellate advocate and eminently qualified, argued 13 cases before federal and state appellate courts, including one before the U.S. Supreme Court and another 10 before federal circuit courts, represented clients in over 50 cases before the state and federal courts of appeal. Supreme Court alone, he's briefed 10 merit stage cases and another 8 cert stage cases. The nominee, Walker, that Senator Cruz referred to, it is true, was 2 years older when he came before us. Walker had assisted with the briefing in only 4 matters before the Supreme Court, and he was not listed on a single filing. He'd also never served as sole or chief counsel in any case tried to verdict of judgment, and served as associate counsel in only one federal criminal jury trial. It is true that both nominees have different backgrounds, but to suggest that this nominee is not better qualified, I saw it differently. People are entitled to their opinion. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Garcia, I know this topic of not just some of the clients you've had in private practice, but some of the pro bono work that you've taken on has become a little bit of a theme here this morning. And so allow me to do a couple things just for the record and to be abundantly clear with folks who are observing this hearing. You spent about 500 hours per year. It's about 25% of your time providing pro bono legal services. That's a significant amount of time, resources that you're providing to clients and causes that could not otherwise afford the hourly fees of a major law firm, let alone billable hours for yourself and possibly more income for the firm. I think that's commendable and honorable. But because of the clients that have been referenced by my Republican colleagues here on the committee, you've advocated on a pro bono basis for women, for voters, for immigrants, for incarcerated individuals, ensuring their due process rights. Yet they seem to be trying to twist the honor of your work because of who you've chosen to represent on a pro bono basis. Now, I know you know full well the difference between having been an advocate and the work that how you would need to approach your work from the bench if you're fortunate enough to be confirmed. So just to clear up any misconceptions, any misperceptions for anybody following these proceedings, can you, in your own words, describe those differences between being an advocate, being a judge, and dispel any concerns somebody may have that your prior advocacy or pro bono work would inappropriately bias any case you may hear?
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. As you mentioned, the roles of an advocate and a judge are very, very different. As an advocate, my job was to generate the best possible argument for every client that retained my law firm. And I was honored to do that in my paid and pro bono cases, and I'm proud of the work that I've done over the course of my career. The role of a judge, of course, is very different. The Constitution calls for an independent judiciary and impartial judges, and that's why every judge takes an oath to fairly and impartially apply the law. I have great respect for that principle and for this court, the D.C. Circuit, having clerked there and worked there with many folks that I respect, and I would bring that impartiality and dedication to the rule of law if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed.
Great. Now, my next question is actually for both of you. I'd like to hear brief answers to the following. I mean, if in preparation for this moment, you've had a chance to observe any of the prior Judiciary Committee hearings on nominees to the District Court, to the Circuit Court, even a hearing we had on a Supreme Court Justice nominee. You've heard me talk about the importance of diversity. Diversity, not just on the federal bench, but at all levels, and not just folks who sit on the bench, but for law clerks as well. I think as both of you have observed and can share, a clerkship with a federal judge for many can serve as a springboard to a tremendously successful legal career, either as a future judge or in private practice. But too few women and minority law students are given the opportunity to clerk, especially at the federal level and at the upper levels of the federal judiciary, despite having comparable or superior credentials. I'm not going to be shy about this. Now, Mr. Garcia, you've spoken about this issue in the context of your own clerkship experience when you noted that during your time clerking at the Supreme Court, you were one of only 2 Latino clerks at the time, and no black law clerks were there at the time. So the question is this: if you're fortunate enough to be confirmed, number one, do you agree that diversity at all levels of the judiciary, including staff and law clerks, is important? And if so, what would you intentionally do to advance diversity in the judiciary? We'll start with you, Ms. Douglas.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I have been a sitting magistrate judge for the past almost 4 years. I have interviewed and reviewed the qualifications for law clerks from all various backgrounds, backgrounds in their diversity, in ways such as geographically where they were from, whether or not it was race or gender, interests that they have, whether or not it's pro bono or corporate law after leaving their clerkship. I have had 3 law clerks since I have been present as a United States magistrate judge, and they've all been from various diverse backgrounds, and if I am so fortunate to be elevated to the Fifth Circuit, I would continue in that same vein.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Senator. I very much share those sentiments, and if I am confirmed, I do value the importance of having folks with different backgrounds and perspectives on the law, and one thing among others I would try to do is to hire from a range of law schools.
Very good, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Padilla. I want to thank this panel for your cooperation. I'm sorry the beginning was a little disjointed, but you certainly handled yourself well for the committee, and we appreciate your family and friends coming in support. So I would ask you to make room now for our second panel, if you would be so kind to do that. I was going to ask you.
He's way ahead of the game.
If everyone other than Senator Smith would please rise. Raise your right hand. Do you affirm or swear the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? The nominees have all answered in the affirmative, and now Senators Klobuchar and Smith will introduce.
Thank you. I want to, if Senator Smith wants to go first, that's fine. I know she's visiting the committee. Okay, I will. I want to thank Chairman Durbin for holding this important hearing. I'm pleased to introduce Jerry Blackwell for the President's nominee to serve on the Federal District Court. for the District of Minnesota. He is here with his wife, Tiffany, his son, Jade, his aunt, Marianne, and two friends, Marlene and Thomas. I know that there are many others in Minnesota and from his home state of North Carolina who are thrilled, like I am, that he is here as well. Jerry is one of the most respected and accomplished litigators in our state. With nearly 35 years of trial experience, he is ready to serve the federal judiciary and the people of Minnesota. He is the founding partner of Blackwell Burke, one of the largest minority-owned trial law firms in our state. The firm was at one point the second largest black-owned law firm in the country. His firm was named Minnesota's top litigation firm by Benchmark Litigation for 4 years in a row. He has represented businesses, large as small, as well as people in consumer protection and other private civil cases. He has argued over 1,000 motions in state and federal court, served as lead counsel in over 100 cases, and tried multiple cases to verdict. In addition to the acclaim his firm has received, Jerry has been named Minnesota Attorney of the Year 5 times by the state's legal newspaper, including the last 4 years in a row. He's been presented with Lifetime Achievement Awards from the National Bar Association and Benchmark Litigation. He was the recipient of the Profiles in Courage Award from the Minnesota Association of Black Lawyers and has been honored as a distinguished alum from his alma mater, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Jerry also obtained the first pardon in our state history, posthumous pardon for Max Mason, a young black man who was wrongfully convicted of rape in 1920. His conviction came days after a mob lynched 3 other black men in response to a fictitious rape. Mason's pardon was awarded 3 days before the 100-year anniversary of the Duluth lynchings. Jerry captured the attention of our state and our country as Special Assistant Attorney General in one of the most high-profile criminal trials in the history of Minnesota, the prosecution of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. Jerry's masterful closing statement won over the members of the jury and many Americans watching across the country. As I noted, he grew up in North Carolina. Dad, a truck driver, who started working after the 10th grade. His mom worked in a textile mill. She struggled with health conditions, was on dialysis from the time that Jerry was 5 years old. Despite the obstacles in their own lives, Jerry's parents raised their kids to always think about others. For Jerry's little brother, that meant becoming a police sergeant. And for Jerry, that meant practicing law. In fact, he knew he wanted to be a lawyer by the time he was in 2nd grade. I don't know how you know that, but he did. With that goal in mind, he became the first in his family to attend college. He attended, as I noted, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill as a recipient of the prestigious Moorhead Scholarship. He went on to earn his JD from the University of North Carolina School of Law before moving to Minnesota to begin his legal career. Since arriving in Minnesota, Jerry has excelled at every turn. He has the endorsement of NOBLE, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. He's also received a letter from 25 former federal prosecutors in Minnesota from both parties who wrote that Jerry has distinguished himself as a civil practitioner, is a person of great integrity, and is supremely well qualified to serve as a federal district court judge. We've also heard directly from current and former police chiefs in Minnesota who wrote, "We are confident that as a federal district court judge, Mr. Black will approach each case with an open mind and will apply the law consistently and fairly." The ABA Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary unanimously rated Jerry as well qualified to serve as a district court judge, the highest rating the committee awards. I know that, Jerry, you will make an outstanding federal judge for the District of Minnesota. I urge his swift confirmation. I thank the committee that Senator Smith and I appointed to review fine resumes from many, many candidates and appreciate the work that they did and their reference and support for Jerry's nomination as well. Thank you.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Chair Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley, all the members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come before the Senate Judiciary Committee to help introduce Mr. Jerry Blackwell, President Biden's outstanding nominee to be a federal district court judge for the District of Minnesota. I won't repeat too much of what my colleague, Senator Klobuchar, just shared, but I do want to start by also recognizing Mr. Blackwell's family and friends who are here to support you today. Your wife, Tiffany Blackwell, your son, Jade Ellis, your aunt, Marianne Spraggins, and also the support of your friends here today, Marlene Hunt Moss and Thomas Nelson. I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Blackwell's family, friends, and supporters who couldn't be with us today, but are undoubtedly cheering you on in spirit. Mr. Blackwell's background and experience make him supremely qualified to serve as a federal district court judge. After earning his JD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Mr. Blackwell moved to Minnesota, where he began his distinguished legal career in complex multi-district litigation. Mr. Blackwell established himself as a leader in Minnesota's legal community early on by co-founding the Minnesota Association of Black Lawyers in 1995. More recently, in 2020, he helped secure Minnesota's first ever posthumous pardon, as Senator Klobuchar told, for Max Mason, a black man who was wrongly accused of raping a white woman in Duluth in 1920. Mason was wrongly convicted with no evidence by an all-white jury. And of course, Mr. Blackwell played a crucial role in prosecuting former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. Mr. Blackwell was recommended by a judicial selection committee that Senator Klobuchar and I convened, comprised of some of Minnesota's most distinguished lawyers, advocates, and judges. We were blessed to have many fine candidates, as Senator Klobuchar said. I am proud to say Mr. Blackwell has earned the support of former prosecutors, law enforcement officials, and community advocates. So I know that Mr. Blackwell is fully prepared to serve as an outstanding federal district judge for his first day on the job, and I know that he will continue to serve Minnesota well. I urge the committee to support his confirmation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Smith, and of course you are allowed to leave at your discretion for other business. We appreciate your being here. And now the second panel will be given an opportunity for an opening statement, each with 5 minutes, starting with Judge Beam.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley, for convening this hearing. Thank you to President Biden for nominating me to serve on the bench for the Eastern District of Michigan. Thank you to Senator Stabenow and Senator Peters for your service to the state of Michigan, for your support of my nomination, and your kind words of introduction. Finally, thank you to the members of the Senate Judiciary Committee for considering my nomination today. With me today is my family, my husband, Michael Beam, who is an accomplished attorney, a regent for the University of Michigan, and my biggest supporter. For 30 years, Mike has been my best friend, my partner, and my most trusted advisor. Mike is a wonderful husband and a really great dad. Also with me are my 3 kids. I am so proud of each of them. They are smart, funny, engaged, giving, kind, and accomplished young adults. I have no doubt that each of them will change the world for the better in their own unique way. I would also like to acknowledge my parents, Bill and Louise Corder, who worked endlessly on our family farm to give me and my siblings every possible opportunity to succeed. Finally, I would like to thank my friends and family who are cheering me on throughout the country. I am grateful for their support and well wishes. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Blackwell?
Good morning, Chair Durbin. The entire committee, I'd like to say thank you for this opportunity to be able to appear before you today and answer your questions. I want to give a hearty thank you to my senators, Klobuchar and to Senator Smith, who had to leave, for their tremendous support and for their glowing introduction. Thank you. I'm grateful to President Biden also for this nomination and for this opportunity to serve this great country. And it is a great country. I want to start there, where you can have a kid from a textile mill town in Kannapolis, North Carolina, no running water in the house and an outhouse in the back, and a journey of education that started with Head Start to one day, by God's grace, become a Morehead Scholar, to become a national trial counsel for Fortune 500 companies and to handle large plaintiffs' cases also, and even to be now a nominee to the federal bench. I'm grateful for the gifts of education, and I'm grateful for what my parents instilled in me. My father had a 10th grade education, drove a truck long distance, and my mother worked in the textile mill in my town. She passed away young at 42, saying goodbye to me, my father, and my 5 siblings when I was 15 years old. Both of my parents passed on, but what they passed on to me and to my brothers were the values of service and hard work, that life should be principally service, and that in learning to serve others, in serving others, we find our own well-being, the gifts from my parents. I want to thank my wife, Tiffany, who is here today. She's been a small business owner in Minneapolis for 30 years. She has been both my rock and my joy. My son, Jade, came, who just finished his first year in law school at North Carolina Central, and I'm proud of him. My Aunt Marion is here, and she's been a real inspiration. Decades ago, she became the first African-American woman to be the managing director of a Wall Street firm. One is dear to me as a brother. My good friend Tom is here. He has been my wings at different junctures in my life for years. Thank you to my many friends and colleagues who have kept me afloat with their prayers. I look forward to being able to answer your questions this morning, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity to talk to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. Ms. Nardacci?
Thank you, Chair Durbin. Thank you also to Ranking Member Grassley and the members of this committee for allowing me the opportunity to appear before you today and for considering my nomination. Thanks also to Senator Gillibrand and and Majority Leader Schumer for their very kind introductory remarks this morning, as well as their support. I'd also like to thank President Biden for nominating me and giving me the opportunity, if confirmed, to serve both my country and my community. It is truly an honor. I'd also like to introduce the family I have here with me today. My husband Tom is here, and he and I met many years ago as staffers on Capitol Hill on the House side. And we both have a great appreciation for the important work done by Congress. I'd like to thank him for his many years of love and support. I'm truly blessed to have such a wonderful partner in life. My children are also here. My daughter is 10, and my son is 7, and they are both big fans of the Broadway musical Hamilton, and this is their first trip to Washington, D.C. We are so very proud of them, and I'm glad they could join me today. I'd also like to take a moment to mention a few folks who could not be here today, but who I know are watching from home. In particular, my parents, who first taught me important values like hard work, fairness, humility. A special thank you to them. Also, my older brother and his family, my younger brother, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and all my extended family. And I'd also like to thank my friends, my colleagues, and members of New York's Capital Region community for their support. Thank you, and I look forward to answering the committee's questions.
Thank you, Ms. Nardacci. Mr. DeZeno, thank you and welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, members of the committee, thank you for your consideration and your time. I'd like to thank President Biden for nominating me and the other senators on the committee and their staffs for their courtesy and time in meeting with me. I'd also like to thank Ranking Member Grassley and Senator Graham first for their warm introductions, both of whom I had the honor of working for while each served as chairman of this committee. I was privileged to be on the front lines as a staffer handling matters of significant importance to this country. I have a deep respect for this institution and this committee, and I'm fortunate for the great relationships I formed on both sides of the aisle. I want to introduce my family. My wife, Sarah, is here, along with my children, Colin, who is 7, and Maya, who is 5. Sarah has championed my professional career. She's truly my better half, as well as my best friend, confidant, and sounding board. Without her love and support, I would not be here today. I also want to thank my mother, Sally, who has passed, my father, Dick, both of whom provided me with love and guidance throughout my life, my brothers, Chris and Peter, sisters, Patrice and Julie, and their spouses, Denise, Arlette, and Martin, my in-laws, Dave and Judy, for their support, my brother and sister-in-law, Jacob and Carrie, and their spouses, Olivia and Chris. Thanks also to my friends who have supported me, including those who are here with me today. It's an honor and a privilege to be nominated as a member of the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. I had the opportunity to work closely with the board in connection with my role as Chief National Security and Crime Counsel on this committee. I understand well the importance of the board's independent oversight over and advice regarding federal counterterrorism activities. The board plays an integral role in ensuring an appropriate balance between national security concerns and privacy and civil liberties. If confirmed, I pledge to approach each issue with an open mind, to exercise independent judgment, consider carefully the views of all relevant stakeholders. I look forward to collaboratively working with my fellow board members in building consensus on issues. Thank you for considering my nomination, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much to the entire panel, and thank you for your patience in waiting while the other panel concluded their work here. Mr. Blackwell, I served 14 years in the House, and this is my 26th year in the Senate. This is the first time I've ever chaired a committee. You say, Durbin, what were you waiting for? I was waiting for seniority, and sometimes it smiles upon you and sometimes it doesn't. But I was lucky because this was the committee I would have chosen above all others to chair. I think the Senate Judiciary Committee has a storied history, most of it distinguished, and has been at the center of the biggest debates of our time, as it should be. You won't be surprised with what I'm about to say. Hardly a day goes by with any hearing considering any matter before the committee that the issue of race does not become part of the conversation. Yesterday, we talked about the untimely death of so many law enforcement officers in the line of duty. It was heartbreaking because I've attended the funerals, as other members have, of these law enforcement officials, and they gave their lives for us in the line of duty. The day disintegrated into a debate about race, Black Lives Matter, defund the police, all of the slogans which we know are part of the conversation on race in America today. You have done many things in your professional life, but there's one that distinguishes you from all others in the decision to be the prosecutor, the special prosecutor in the Chauvin trial in Minnesota. It was an awesome responsibility, and from my point of view, I think you handled it professionally. I couldn't have asked for better administration of justice in that courtroom, from what I could see as an outside observer. I will tell you, though, I think you understand better than anyone else that that moment, that 9 minutes and a few seconds, when Derek Chauvin took the life of George Floyd on video, is an image I'll never get out of my mind. Never. I'll see his face forever, as I saw the face of the little Vietnamese girl running after the napalm. It's going to be there forever. Give me something that's hopeful on the issue of race, because you've seen the worst parts of it in our nation. Give me something that gives me hope that we will get behind this and be a better nation for it.
Thank you, Senator. It is my view, and it was a feeling that I had coming out of the Chauvin trial and listening to all of the comments I heard and the emails I got and interviews I was involved in. I came to this conclusion and feeling that the issues as Americans that unite us, the things we care about, are greater than all of the different issues we find to divide us. And that I saw this sort of groundswell across the board. It didn't matter, political spectrum, race, gender, where people felt in response to some of the divisiveness at the time that we are better than this. That you saw, for example, those who were standing up for the notion of e pluribus unum from the Many of Us One following the Chauvin trial. It wasn't like the 60s where you may have seen a number of audiences were overwhelmingly African-American in Minnesota. I wouldn't say it was. It was people from all races, colors, persuasions who stood up to be a part of this experiment to improve, to make America better. It inspired me to want to continue in this trajectory of service, this time toward the bench, and I'm happy to have been able to serve in those ways, including in Chauvin, but not like to take that service in a different form of service, fealty to the law, to the federal bench.
Let's go directly to the issue. Chauvin was found guilty. He's serving time for it, at least 20 years as I remember. And the question is, what do you think about law enforcement, having been part of one of the most celebrated, I don't know if celebrated is the word, famous is a word, I guess. I'm struggling to make sure I put it in the right context. One of the most well-known trials of a law enforcement official and being the prosecutor who found him guilty. What is your attitude toward law enforcement and police in the United States today?
Senator, I think in some ways the law enforcement were the heroes of that trial. I myself am a former police intern with the Menlo Park Police Department. My little brother is a retired police sergeant. You saw in that trial the men and women from the Minneapolis Police Department who testified and talked about the bad policing that we saw and what happened to George Floyd. They stood up and spoke out against bad policing as in the best interest of good policing, because the good police, and I think most of them are good, they honor the badges. They do their jobs with honor. Those police officers don't, in my view, deserve to be tarnished by the behaviors of those who don't honor the badge. And when I saw Chief Arredondo stand up, when I saw all the other officers stand up in that trial, there wasn't an ounce of daylight between me and them, and standing up for the best tradition of police, who honor that badge, who take their public service seriously.
Thank you. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all of our nominees. I want to start with the judge. Judge, in terms of the powers given to the various branches of government, is the U.S. Constitution a doctrine of plenary powers or enumerated powers?
Thank you, Senator, for your question.
You're welcome.
Congress is afforded enumerated powers in the Constitution, not plenary powers.
Okay. Counselor, we know that the 14th Amendment requires states to afford equal protection of the law to its citizens. But it only applies to the states. What provision of the federal Constitution requires the federal government to afford equal protection?
Well, the 14th Amendment, as well as the 5th Amendment, also guarantee due process to all citizens, the federal process and or state, and as well under the I think the 14th Amendment also the federal government is bound by the 14th Amendment of the federal Constitution, so it also would bind the federal entities.
Okay, Counselor. What is the difference between the Privileges and Immunities Clause and the Privileges or Immunities Clause of the Constitutions?
Thank you, Senator. The Privileges and Immunities Clause in the Constitution prevents states from discriminating against citizens of other states. And then the Privileges or Immunities Clause in the 14th Amendment prevents states from disparaging or discriminating against citizens in their federal rights.
Okay. Mr. DeZeno, did I say that your name right?
Yes, sir.
Please don't be offended, but I'm not about to mess with one of Senator Grassley's nominees, okay? So let me start and go back that way. Counselor, I've got to ask you this question. You just became a partner at Bowie E. Schiller?
Senator, I became a partner in 2020.
Right. And you're going to give up all that big money to join the federal bench? You worked for all that time?
Senator, I've been in private practice for 20 years now.
Yeah.
You
were at Skadden Arps?
I started my career at Skadden Arps.
You spent a lifetime there in 1 week, didn't you?
I got
in terms of billable hours.
I sure did, Senator, and I also got a lot of great training.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed my time in private practice, but I believe in public service, and I'm honored to have the opportunity, if confirmed, to serve my country.
Okay. Counselor, We know that the United States Supreme Court has delineated certain classifications to be suspect classifications, right? What are they?
Well, some examples of suspect.
Just list them for me because I don't have much time.
Okay. Race is a suspect
Right.
classification.
What else?
National origin
Right.
is a suspect classification. I think, well, I'd have to look to see the rest. That's examples of two of them, Senator.
Okay. What are the criteria for getting to be a suspect classification? I mean, we know that race and religion, as you said, and alienage and national origin are suspect classifications. But what are the criteria that a classification has to meet in order to be a suspect classification? Is that clear, or am I being unclear?
The question is clear. We'll see how clear my answer is.
Okay.
I've been a private practitioner for 35 years, and I'd had cause to have to examine that. But as I understand, at least one of the aspects of what makes a suspect classification is the fact that it is a vulnerable population.
Vulnerable how so?
Politically so. For example, the classification of minorities as a suspect class was an example of one that was politically vulnerable. I know
What
that
else?
was one of the
What
factors. Senator, I'd have to research it to know, but that's what comes to mind.
Okay. Judge, I'm going to land this plane in time. What's the Dormant Commerce Clause?
Senator, I appreciate your question, and as I sit here today after studying for the last 2 weeks, I just can't recall. I know it's in my note cards if you want me to go grab them.
Okay.
And I apologize.
That's okay. I'm done. Mr. DeZeno, please tell Grassley I didn't ask you any questions. Okay?
Thank you, Senator.
You bet.
And Judge Beam, none of us on this side of the table would do very well with Kennedy's bar exam either, so. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll start with you, Senator Blackwell. Well, you, soon to be Judge Blackwell, sorry. You have represented businesses, large and small, as well as people in consumer protection, private civil cases. You've tried cases in federal courts, in state courts in 47 states, serving as the lead trial counsel in over 100 cases, arguing appeals in front of the 7th, 8th, and 9th circuits. Can you speak to your experience as a civil litigator and talk about your decision as being an incredibly successful lawyer at this stage in your career to decide you want to serve on the bench?
Thank you, Senator. It's been a wonderful opportunity and learning as a civil litigator, and I've been somewhat of a generalist for years as a plaintiff's lawyer initially, handling even involved in large cases, mass torts, and after 4 or 5 years starting to do more defense work. So I've done a smattering of work, from complex civil to MDLs, class actions. I was for years a lawyer for Prince, and so on it goes. It's been wonderful practice, at least to say, leading up to being a judge. One thing I learned in complex civil litigation is that it's always learning. Every case is new. Every case involves things you need to learn. That, to me, is very much like I'm expecting the experience to be of being a district court judge. Every case brings things that are new. It's perpetual learning. And you have to get comfortable with what I call gray areas. That is, the areas where they're not clear right or wrong answers. They're just solutions that work better than some other solutions. Mm-hmm. So that's some of what I've taken away from the practice.
Okay. Did you say you were a lawyer for Prince?
That did happen, yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, I was just thinking I could ask Senator Kennedy a series of questions about different Prince songs, but I will leave that. I will leave that for later. So I see that Senator...
About what? I didn't hear that.
He was the lawyer for Prince, which is not an easy thing to do, and I thought there's many interesting Prince songs that I could ask you about in kind of our own question and answer. So yeah, this is the Prince color. That's right. So I see that Senator Tillis is here, and I know you are just a proud person growing up in North Carolina. Your parents, you told your whole story. Just that experience of having your dad, truck driver, your your mom sick from when you were 5 on, I believe, and just your decision then to just keep going and go to college, go to law school, your brother becoming a police sergeant. What that experience, you talked about the experience itself, but what that gives you on the bench.
It gives me a heart to serve, first of all, because so much has been sort of given to me by the universe all around me, and I wanted to reach a point in the career where I could devote myself purely to service. And it gives me experience with a broad spectrum of people. I mean, most of the folks I have known in my formative years are working class people. There were people that worked with their hands, and we didn't know anybody in my neighborhood who went to college. And so it gave me an appreciation for those kind of values, for the folks that work with the hands, with heart. And I've broadened that spectrum over the years now with the education. But I take to the bench that there will be a broad spectrum of humanity that will appear before the courts also. And I'm grateful to have had a broad background and experience in dealing with people.
Thank you. Mr. DeZeno, I figure someone's got to ask you a question, so I will, because, you got your family there and everything. For 8 years, you served as an assistant U.S. attorney. You then spent 2 years as an associate deputy attorney general at the Department of Justice, focusing on national security, it was noted. And you spent time working here on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Can you discuss what you learned in these roles and how they will inform your approach in the job for which you're nominated?
Thank you, Senator. So in my role here, we always accounted for government equities, looking at national security authorities, especially with the reauthorization of Section 702 back in 2018, the Senate passage of the USA Freedom Act reauthorization in 2020. And like I said, we always tried to look at the government equities and their arguments for strengthening or keeping their programs and authorities in place, while also keeping an open mind and listening to civil society, civil liberties groups, and understanding the impact that some of these authorities have on American citizens, and try to weigh those competing interests.
Okay, thanks. My last question, Mr. Chair, quickly. Ms. Nardici, Durbin's going to love this question. You have practiced law. You currently focus on complex commercial litigation. Much of your work has involved antitrust issues, where you've represented both defendants and plaintiffs, including class action lawsuits. How will your expertise in antitrust law assist you as a district court judge if you are confirmed?
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. I know antitrust is near and dear to your heart, as it is to mine. I've gained a lot of experience in federal court litigating antitrust matters, and it's given me expertise not only in the substantive area of the law, a lot of other areas of law that it intersects with, as well as complex procedures like multi-district litigations and class actions. And I think I can bring all that experience to bear if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all of you for your nominations, and to your families, I'm sure, that are very proud of you. Mr. DeZeno, I'm going to ask you a question, or a couple of questions. You come highly recommended by Chair Grassley. I expect to support your nomination. What do you think we need to do at the PCLOB to better protect America's civil liberties?
Thank you, Senator. That's a broad question. Yeah. The board, as you know, has its jurisdiction and mission with respect to counterterrorism authorities and programs across the intelligence community. The board's spoken very forcefully on a number of issues. Maybe the seminal report in 2015 about the bulk collection program stands out in my mind. So,
what about issues related to really just balancing public safety against privacy?
Yeah, that's really the thrust of the board's role.
Yeah.
Continuing the work that the board is doing, but also having an opportunity to, if I'm fortunate to be confirmed, talk to my colleagues to determine what priorities are ahead of us for at least the near future. But I think I mentioned the reauthorization of Section 702 is on Congress's calendar, so to speak. It's set to expire in December of 2023, so that that certainly is at the top of the list of priorities.
Thank you. Actually, Mr. Blackwell, if I'd known you represented Prince, I would have asked you a few other questions when we met before the hearing. But I do want to go back to a couple of statements that you made and give you an opportunity to put it into context. One of them that caught my attention, I think it related to, I don't know if these are your words or not, so the first want to clear up whether they're your words, but something to the effect that the biggest challenge of the trial was getting the public to question its trust in policing. Now, let me give you some context before you answer the question. Yesterday, we had a hearing with law enforcement, and I just happened during the hearing, during public comments, do a quick Google on Black Lives Matters and Black Lives Matter and Act Blue, which is a Democrat organization that legally aggregates money. But they have, I want you to answer the question I've asked you, but they've got this run that they're doing. They're raising money on. They call it the 13.12 run. And this is where they've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. And 1312, translated according to their webpage, stands for ACAB. All cops are bastards. This is what they're advertising to encourage people to run and raise money for Black Lives Matter. So that's giving you a little bit of context for it. Did I read into that statement, if it was your words, that humans are not angels, up to and including law enforcement officers? But do you feel like there's any room for that kind of discussion in the discourse as it relates to law enforcement officers? And also just confirm whether or not your statement was your statement and your reasoning behind it.
Yeah, Senator, I appreciate your question. The statement you quoted from, at least to my recollection, was not my statement, and I don't know what exactly that refers to.
Good enough for me. If you didn't say it, you don't need to explain something you didn't say.
Yeah, so that's not me. And the commentary that you would have cited, it's not also commentary that I'm familiar with. I do have to say in response to the question, as you know, as a sitting judges have limited jurisdiction. We only deal with the cases and controversies that come before the court, and we'll try to avoid taking on statements that belong as parts of public debate or in the policy arena. I'm not familiar with that particular statement that you read. As I quoted previously, I found, for example, in the Chauvin trial, that the men and women of the Minneapolis Police Department who stood up and showed up and spoke up were extraordinary representatives of the best in policing. And there wasn't, to me, an ounce of daylight between us in terms of standing up for good policing.
For me, it's just, you didn't make the statement, so I'm not going to read anything into it. But I just think for me, when we're talking about trying to address crime and build better relationships with law enforcement and trust in law enforcement, which is very important, that these sorts of things I'm going to continue to focus on when people are raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not your job. You didn't make the statement, so I'm not going to go any further with that. My time has expired, and I know we've got another vote coming, but again, thank you all for our congratulations on your nominations to you and your families, and thank you for being willing to serve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Tillis, and thanks to this panel for their patience. And you may get some questions for the record. If you do and can respond to them promptly, it will help us move things along, and we're trying to do our best to approve all of the nominees before the end of the year. So your cooperation is going to be important in that respect. So thank you all, and thank you to your family and friends for this important appearance before the Senate Judiciary Committee. At this point, the committee stands adjourned.